Hey everybody, I'm Sean. Welcome to another episode of Angling Spiders. Welcome back everybody. On today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about what it takes to get into ice fishing. So you are interested in going ice fishing, maybe for the first time, and you don't have any of the gear and you're wondering what you need. That's what today's video is going to be. I want to run through some of the things that are must-haves in order to get out there ice fishing for the very first time. And then I'm going to cover off a couple of nice to haves that will make your life a lot easier. So that's what I'm going to do. Let's just dive right into it in this episode. All right, everybody. So like I said, you want to go ice fishing for the first time. The number one thing you're going to need to go ice fishing is a way to drill a hole. You got to get through the ice so that you can get your rod through. And in order to do that, you're going to need something to drill a hole. Now, for that, you need an auger, and the ice augers out in the market vary significantly in price and usability. For those of you that are first timers, you probably would be looking at, unless you really want to invest right off the start, you're probably looking at a manual auger. And that's how we got started out. We went and bought a manual auger. They are really cheap, and you can pick them up at places like Bass Pro Shops on sale sometimes for as cheap as $49. Now they're not usually that. I've seen them typically around the $69 to $89, but they do go on sale at certain times of the year. Also, because a lot of people start out with a manual auger and then upgrade, you can find a ton of them on used sites like Facebook Marketplace and Kijiji. You might be able to pick one up for 25, 30 bucks. After that, your options are either gas powered or electric. And the other thing that you need to consider when you're going out to get an auger is the size of the auger. A lot of the manual augers out there are 6-inch or 8-inch in diameter, so that's the size of the hole that they're going to make for you to fish through. Obviously, the smaller the diameter, the easier it is to drill. So a manual auger that's a 6-inch auger is going to be a lot easier to drill through the ice than an 8-inch. When you get into the larger gas-powered or electric augers, you can get up into the 10-inch range, and that's actually what I have. I have upgraded to the electric ion, and this has a 10-inch diameter auger blade on the bottom. Keep in mind, if you go the manual route, it can be a lot of work to drill a hole, but basically it is about close to 2¼ feet or 26, 27 inches today of ice. And that's a lot of ice to drill through with a manual auger. You're going to be tired. It's also a lot of ice to drill through with an electric auger. And even with a power auger like mine, when the ice gets really thick, you are pushing a lot of ice to get through it. And my 10-inch auger, my 10-inch ion, struggles a little bit when I get down past 2 feet. You're going to get the most reliability out of a gas-powered auger in terms of power and your ability to drill holes consistently. But you got to remember that on a power auger, you're going to have gas, and you've got to find a way to store it in your vehicle if you are storing fuel and oil and gas, and you got to make sure that gas doesn't leak in your vehicle. So that's why I went with the electric route, because I have a minivan and I want to put the auger inside and not smell up the inside of my minivan. So I got an electric auger, and yes, it struggles a little bit at times, but it works. So that's the number one thing you're going to need if you want to go ice fishing. You need an auger, you need a way to drill a hole. Beyond that, you don't need much else. I'm going to be honest with you. A couple more things. All right, number two, the number two thing that I would say you need for ice fishing is a dipper. And literally, this is just a tool to clean the ice out of your hole. Now, why do I say it's kind of essential? Well, when you are drilling out your holes, particularly with a manual auger, there's going to be a lot of slush left in your hole. And depending on how cold out it is that day, that can get in the way of you being able to put your bait or your line down the hole. So you want to clean that hole out, get all the slush out of there, and you need something to do it. Now I have a steel dipper, stainless steel, so it doesn't rust. It also has a ruler on it so you can measure the depth of the ice, which is of course important for ice safety. And it's got a nice big dipper on it for scooping the slush. This is not what I started with. Again, when we first started, I wanted to go as cheap as possible. So I got one of these in plastic. They usually come in orange plastic. Why orange plastic? So that when they're laying on the ice, you don't lose them. And the orange plastic ones, they're pretty cheap. I think they're sometimes around $8.99 or something. They're not very expensive. So you need something to clean the hole out with, and the broader the scoop, the better, because the less number of times you're going to have to go into that hole to clear out the slush. Because if you have a really small dipper, it can take quite a while, and you get tired of cleaning out your holes. All right, everyone. So now you've got your holes drilled with your auger. You've got the holes cleaned out with your dipper, and really, to go ice fishing, all you really need is one more piece of gear, and that is something to catch the fish on. And for ice fishing, that typically means one of two things: either an ice fishing rod or a tip up. If you've got that and you can put some tackle on the end of the line attached to these, you can pretty much go ice fishing, and that's all you really need. Now, there are some advantages and disadvantages to each of these types, the tip up and the rod, and so I'll quickly go over those and tell you my preference. All right, first up is a tip up, and you can buy these at any fishing tackle store. There are cheaper versions and more expensive versions, just like everything else. The cheaper versions of tip ups are typically going to be like this one, made of plastic. Sometimes they actually come pre-spooled with braided line, but this one I had to put my own line on, and I had to spool it with some braid. How tip ups work is they've got some pretty basic components. Hanging underneath of the tip up here, you've got your spool of line that you attach your tackle to and your bait. Then you've got this base, and this basically is what sits on the ice over the edge of your hole. And then you've got a flag, and once you get your bait down the hole and set where you want it, you can then take this flag and insert it under this grommet right here. That is going to lock the flag in place, and then when a fish bites, it's going to turn the spool, which also turns this grommet, and sets the flag off. That's basically how a tip up works. The benefits of a tip up is that there is no tension on this line. When a fish grabs your bait and runs with it, there is no tension, there's no drag. The fish can just free spool this line, take off, and run. So sometimes when a fish bites your line and runs with it, it might only have it barely in its mouth, but it isn't hooked yet. And by swimming away with that bait, it gives it some time to get that bait in its mouth. And you can sometimes get better hookup ratios with a tip up. The biggest disadvantage of a tip up, you are gonna be pulling in that fish by hand. There's no reel on here. When you go and grab this tip up and you set the hook on the fish, you are pulling that fish in by hand. So if you like fighting fish on a reel, this is not the way to go. The way to go is a fishing rod. All right, so next up we have what is probably more familiar to most folks, and that is a rod and reel. But you're not going to be able to typically use a rod that you have from summer fishing because it's going to be too big for ice fishing. You can do it. I've seen people using 5 to 6 foot rods ice fishing. You have to sit that distance away from the hole if you're jigging, for instance. So it's a bit more cumbersome to be sitting that far away from the hole and using your summer rods. So my recommendation is to go out and get yourself an ice fishing rod and reel, similar to this one. Now, they're typically going to be a lot smaller and a lot easier to handle. This one came with a different reel when I bought it. This was an Ugly Stick GX2 combo, ice fishing combo, and for the rod and reel I think I paid $40. So you can get these things relatively affordable. This is going to be a lot more familiar to people because basically it's just rod and reel fishing. The difference here, and one of the disadvantages of using a rod and reel, is that if you want to set this on the ice, you're going to need a rod holder. Unless you're going to sit in a chair and jig it, which many people can do. The second you want to step away from that, or if you want to be using another line while you're out fishing, which in many places is legal. Here in Alberta we can use 2 lines on the ice at any one time. You're going to need to set the rod in something, so you're going to need a rod holder. That's a disadvantage. You can make rod holders, you can buy rod holders. There's a whole bunch of different kinds. They range from small wireframe rod holders all the way up to very expensive jaw jackers. I've made jaw jackers myself. I've highlighted them in other videos, and I'll show you a shot of those right now. I've also picked up from Amazon some screw-in type rod holders. These like this one that actually screw right into the ice. And I actually really like this one a lot when I'm ice fishing. This one is really good if you just need a basic rod holder. This one works really well, and it folds up for easy packing. So you're going to need a rod holder, and that's really it. If you've got an auger, if you've got a dipper or a hole cleaner of some kind, and you've got a rod or a tip up, you can go ice fishing. It's pretty much that simple. And all these other things that you see on channels, including mine, are just nice to haves, not need to haves. But that being said, I'm going to cover a few nice to haves, because I'll tell you, once you get into ice fishing, there are a few things that make your life definitely a lot easier. Okay, with the basics covered, just a couple of things really quick on the nice to have, make your life a little bit easier front. First and foremost, a tent. If you're going to spend a lot of time doing ice fishing, you're going to find days that are really nice, like today. I could be out here today without a coat on. It's just absolutely beautiful out here today. But you're also going to have days when it is really, really cold, and in particularly if it's windy, that is horrible. So something that can break the wind, and also something that can be a windbreak and also give you a little bit of extra warmth, an ice fishing tent is the way to go. You can get them in two types. You can get them in insulated and non-insulated. Obviously the insulated versions are going to be warmer and keep the heat in a lot better, but they're also a lot more expensive. So that's nice to have number one. Nice to have number two is actually something that's pretty basic, and that is some kind of a strike signaling system. There's a lot of them out there on the market. Basically what I'm talking about is when you get a bite, something that makes a noise. Now if you're using tip-ups, you've already got that flag, as I said, but there are other things on the market that will also give you an audible alarm. As an example, probably the cheapest and most simple are these little bells. I think I got these off of Temu, and they were like 20 for $1.99 or something. I can't even remember, but super cheap. When you get a bite, they jiggle and you get an audible alarm that you've got a bite. There are electronic versions out there on the market. There are some with lights, so that if you plan on fishing in the nighttime or at dawn or dusk, there's actually a flashing light as well. So there's all kinds. Something super useful that I use all the time, because if you have more than one rod out, you might have one behind you, your back might be turned to it, you can't see it, but if you have an audible alarm, you will hear it, and that always helps, and that's a big one. The last nice to have from my experience, a good chair. When you're out ice fishing, you're going to spend a lot of time sitting and watching your lines, a significant amount of time sitting and watching your lines, and so you need to have a comfortable chair, something that you is portable, is easy to set up and take down, but is going to be comfortable for you. Something with back support, particularly for those of you that have back issues like me. And this one that I got as a gift actually is absolutely fantastic. So that's my nice to have number three. Now there's a whole bunch of other things that come after this in terms of nice to haves in ice fishing. Like I said, you might eventually want to upgrade to an electric or a gas auger. You might want to upgrade it to a heater for your tent. And there's all kinds of versions of heaters out there, from propane to diesel heaters. You might want electronics, which I also have, so that when you are sitting in your tent, you can put an ice fishing camera down the hole to see if there's any fish down there. There's all kinds of upgrades, just like in every other aspect of fishing, that you can spend money on, but you do not need all that stuff to catch a fish. You just need the basics. All right, everybody, before I close this one out, I want to stress ice fishing safety. If you have not been out on the ice before and it's your first time, please make sure that you are checking ice safety. I said it in other videos, but you want to make sure that the ice is thick enough before you go out onto it. The recommended thickness of ice, safe ice, is 4 to 6 inches to walk on, over 8 inches to drive on. And personally, I prefer not even driving on the ice unless there's 12. I know some people think that's crazy, but you just never know. And even when the ice is thick, there's always the opportunities when you're driving on the ice to find a crack or a spring where the ice is thin. So you always have to be vigilant, even in the heart of winter when the ice is thick. That means your own safety as well. When you're walking on the ice, one of the things that I have is ice cleats so that I'm not going to slip. You can also buy things like this, which are ice picks, so that if you fell through the ice, you can use these to grab the edge of the ice and pull yourself out. And this year, finally, I also have what is a float suit, so that if I was to fall through the ice, this suit allows me to float. I will not sink. So please, if you are going to get into ice fishing, make sure you investigate the safety part as well. We don't want anybody getting hurt out there. And there are stories every single year in the ice fishing season of people who go through the ice because they are not following safe practices. So if you're going to get into it, please make sure that you're doing it safely. All right, everybody. That's my overview of getting into ice fishing and the things that I think you need. If you guys think there's other things that I've missed or you feel strongly about it, please put some comments down below. I would love to hear from you. And outside of that, that's going to do it for this one. If you liked the video, smash that like button, hit subscribe. And until next time, good fishing.